Now let's turn to Ukraine now, where officials say Russia has launched another large-scale missile and drone attack across the whole of Ukraine. Ukraine's military said air defense systems were engaged in repelling attacks and intercepted all projectiles launched at Kyiv. There are also reports of explosions in the western city of Lviv and Zaporizhzhia. Ukrainian media say Russian forces launched cruise and ballistic missiles, rockets and Shahed-type drones throughout the night. Well, let's speak to our Ukraine correspondent, James Waterhouse. James, good to have you. What's the latest we know about these attacks, as well as the damage they may have caused?
Well, this is clearly another large-scale nationwide attack launched by Russia on Ukraine. We're told by the authorities that 7 regions were affected, from Ivano-Frankivsk in the west to Zaporizhzhia in the southeast, and it seems the targets were Ukraine's infrastructure once more. We're told 3 major thermal power stations have been damaged in the southern city of Kherson. The railway station, as well as surrounding tracks have reportedly been damaged too. And we're also told that residential buildings in some of these cities, like Lviv, have been damaged as well, and that civilians have been injured. But we don't have any idea on numbers yet. But Ukraine likes to count the number of projectiles that make their way in. Overnight, it was 76, 59 of which were intercepted, they say. So these are drones and missiles that were launched from over the Caspian Sea to the east of Ukraine by Russian bombers. They were launched from inside Russia itself, as well as from occupied territory inside Ukraine. So, things have been quiet for a while, but it's clear that Russia has the means to launch such attacks of this size alongside waging its war on the vast front lines in the east and south of Ukraine.
All right, James, thank you for that update.
When I started this administration, people were saying there's going to be a collapse in the economy. We have the strongest economy in the world. Let me say it again, in the world.
Although GDP last week was far short of expectations.
Oh, it wasn't. Look, GDP is still growing. Look at the response of the markets. Overwhelmingly positive. Overwhelmingly positive. And one of the reasons why people feel good about it not being as strong as it was before is they believe that the Fed's going to respond.
They hope they're going to get a rate cut.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, no president's had the run we've had in terms of creating jobs and bringing down inflation. It was 9% when I came to office. 9%. But look, people have a right to be concerned. Ordinary people, the idea that you bounce a check and you get a $30 fee for bouncing the check, I changed that. You can't charge more than $8 for that. Or your credit card, your late payment, $35.
Let's get right to the breaking news out of Georgia and Donald Trump's election interference case there. An appeals court has just announced it will review the judge's ruling to let prosecutor Fani Willis stay on this case. Trump and his co-defendants want to remove her from the case because of her personal relationship with the former top prosecutor. And joining us now, former U.S. attorney and MSNBC legal analyst Joyce Vance. Joyce, this is the appeals court now reviewing the judge's decision to let Willis stay on the case. What does this really mean? What's the process going to be now?
Right. So this is what's called an interlocutory appeal on an appeal that takes place before trial. And the Court of Appeals wasn't obligated to hear this appeal. The decision this morning is that they will, in fact, take the case. It's taken them weeks to make the decision simply to hear the case. that means we're more likely in for months before they decide whether the trial judge got it right when he said Fani Willis could stay on the case. If that decision happens months out, whichever party loses is likely to take an appeal to Georgia's Supreme Court, and that effectively means that this trial will not take place before the election.
Joyce, Nathan Wade, the person who was a special prosecutor she had brought on, who she had this relationship with, he just gave an interview to ABC News over the weekend, and I want to play part of what he said.
Workplace romances are as American as apple pie. It happens to everyone.
Do you think that you've done any kind of damage to this case?
None at all.
Even the public perception of it?
There again, this takes me back to the initial statement that I made. My private life became the focal point of the case. And my private life has nothing to do with the merits of that prosecution.
Joyce, will the appeals court agree?
Well, look, Mr. Wade is entitled to his opinion, but prosecutors are held to and have to hold themselves to a higher standard of conduct. The decision here, may well be that there is some problem, but the trial judge saw fit to cure any issues by saying that Willis could stay on the case as long as Wade didn't. That was a good split the baby solution, and it wouldn't be unexpected if the Court of Appeals affirms the trial judge here.
And just the fact that the appeals court decided to take this, didn't just swat it away, what does that tell you about where this could be headed?
Yeah, I don't read anything substantive into this decision. I think this case is high profile. It's political. Georgia has elected state appellate courts. It's not surprising that they would feel obligated to hear this case rather than just to let it ride.
Let's talk about what happened in Lower Manhattan yesterday in the courtroom. The testimony, at times, we were saying earlier, was perhaps a little cringy when she was describing what happened in that hotel room, she says, in Lake Tahoe in 2006. Some of the comments that then not president, but just Donald Trump was talking about his wife and his daughter, making comparisons to StormyDaniels. What did you make, though, of her effectiveness as a prosecution witness?
So I thought she was effective. I thought the cringe was kind of the point. This was the story that Donald Trump did not want America to hear. This is why he was willing to pay the money to her. A guy who we've heard is very frugal, was willing to make sure this payment was made so that America didn't hear about him showing up, in his Hugh Hefner satin pajamas, that he didn't sleep in the same bed as his wife, and that there was a woman he wanted to sleep with who he was saying reminded him of his daughter, right? Like, ick. I mean, so you had all of these things that portrayed Donald Trump as really this kind of lame, desperate, creepy old man. And that is a story he wouldn't have wanted to get out. I mean, if that had gotten out, it would have been make America gag again, because that's how it felt in the jury, in the overflow room. There were people who were having visceral reactions to what she was saying. So I think, again, it just drove home the prosecution's point. This was the story he did not want to get out, and that's why he made the payment.
And so, Joyce, what we heard from the defense yesterday effectively is that this might be interesting, it's tawdry, it's salacious, but it's not connected to the alleged crime. How do you draw the line between what happened allegedly in that hotel room in Lake Tahoe in 2006 and the crime the prosecution is alleging here?
Right, and that's exactly the issue that got teed up in the motion for mistrial yesterday. So Christie is absolutely correct when she says that it's legitimate for the prosecution to present this testimony. It explains to the jury what it was that Donald Trump was trying to prevent, what he spent his $130,000 to keep out of the public domain. And the issue for appeal is whether or not that was unduly prejudicial to Donald Trump in the sense that the judge was wrong when he denied the mistrial. But there's a midway strategy here that the judge will use to prevent there being any error that taints a verdict if Donald Trump is convicted in the case. The judge has said he will give the jury a limiting instruction. And our colleague Danny Sabalas was on in the first hour suggesting that you can't unring the bell once a jury hears testimony like this. But that's not really the case. And the law says that where the judge gives a limiting instruction, telling the jury, for instance, in this case, it might be something like, you can't consider this evidence for the truth of the matter. You're not called upon to decide whether, for instance, this sex was consensual or distasteful, or whether Stormy Daniels was threatened in a parking lot. You can only use this evidence to determine what the story that Stormy Daniels would have told was that Donald Trump and his campaign wanted to keep out of the public domain. So a limiting instruction like that will cure any possible error and permit a verdict to be affirmed on appeal if there is one.
What it is a glitch.
They eventually got some Border Force officers to start manually processing all the passports, which takes a lot longer than the e-gates. At the same time, there's hundreds of people joining the passport control area from other flights that were coming in. So very quickly, it turned very chaotic.
Everybody waiting 4 hours that way.
Like I'm rushing. What happened? One guy.